last time the United States military had such a sizable presence in Vietnamese waters, they were waging war. Now they're welcoming the old enemy aboard and selling them souvenirs.
$60, so I'll take this.
The visit to the city of Da Nang by the aircraft carrier Carl Vinson and support ships is a powerful symbol that relations between the former foes have been transformed.
It's the same thing that the mission has always been. We're promoting peace, prosperity, and stability in the region.
Da Nang holds some bad memories for the US military. Combat troops came ashore here 53 years ago this week to begin their campaign to try to help South Vietnam defeat the communist North. They failed, and a previously divided country was unified under communist rule, which remains today. A huge warship back in Vietnam may be uncomfortable for some, but others believe it's a positive step.
The war is over. The past is the past, and the future is opening up for us. After 21 years of a normalised relationship between our two countries, the situation is getting better.
That's been helped by a common interest, China, and its increasingly assertive role in the region. This ship is anchored in Da Nang Bay, which then becomes the South China Sea, where Vietnam and other countries are locked in territorial disputes with China. And to a large extent, that seems to be what this deployment is about. China's accused of building military bases and runways for warplanes on islands and reefs, while the US wants to ensure freedom of navigation in the South China Sea. It's found a strategic ally in Vietnam.
Vietnam has had historically a very contentious relationship with the Chinese. That has been exacerbated in recent years by what's happening in the South China Sea. And Vietnam is looking for the United States for backup, for political backup, for military backup in the event there is a conflict or a crisis in the South China Sea.
The US Navy says Chinese ships have been seen on this deployment, but everyone is abiding by the rules. That hasn't always been the case, which has created a situation that's helped bring the United States and Vietnam closer together. Wayne Hay, Al Jazeera, Da Nang, Vietnam.
The Archdiocese of Naples says it has sent the Vatican a 1,200-page dossier compiled by a male escort. The dossier identifies 40 actively gay priests and seminarians in Italy. The dossier contains WhatsApp chats and other evidence. It was compiled by a self-proclaimed gay escort, Francesco Mangiacapra. He has told Italian media that he outed the priests because he couldn't stand their hypocrisy any longer. Mangiacapra was quoted as saying in the diocesan statement that none of the 34 priests or 6 seminarians was accused of having sex with minors.
At least 67 people have died in the earthquake that rocked Papua New Guinea last week, according to the Red Cross. That's more than double an earlier death toll. The magnitude 7.5 quake was the biggest to strike the country's highlands in nearly a century. Strong aftershocks have further damaged roads and caused landslides, making it difficult for aid workers to reach the worst-hit communities. Aid agencies have said nearly 150,000 people need emergency supplies.
Flowing water like this is a rare sight in London at the moment. Thousands of people across the British capital have been left without supplies after their frozen pipes burst. The worst snowstorms in the UK for nearly 30 years froze water in pipes last week. The Siberian storm, dubbed the Beast from the East, grounded planes, stopped trains, blocked roads and shut schools. At least 23,800 households, including 12,000 in London, were left without water after ice burst pipes and then thawed. Bottles are being distributed in places. Consumers are being urged not to waste it. Car maker Jaguar Land Rover has halted production at its plant near Birmingham in central England after water supplies were disrupted. A spokeswoman for the company was unable to say when it would reopen.
Bangladesh summoned Myanmar's ambassador to express concern over the deployment of additional Myanmar troops near the border. Bangladesh handed a protest note to Myanmar's ambassador on Thursday, March 1st, which said that the increased military presence at the border may, quote, escalate tensions. Reuters says Myanmar deployed about 200 security personnel along the border fence with Bangladesh this week. Myanmar forces have been seen moving heavy weapons with them. Across the fence, there is a strip of land referred to as no man's land, where thousands of Rohingya refugees are living after fleeing violence in Myanmar. Although this area is beyond Myanmar's border fence, it's still technically on Myanmar's side of the international border with Bangladesh. The Dhaka Tribune says the military presence across the fence is sparking fear amongst the Rohingya stranded in no man's land. For United News International in Metro Manila, I'm Win Win.
China intends to boost its military spending this year by more than 8%. That's about $175 million. It's the third straight year of single-digit increases after nearly 2 decades of double-digit growth. In 2017, the military budget rose 7% over the year before. President Xi Jinping, the commander-in-chief of China's military, is focusing on modernizing and strengthening the country's armed forces. China is believed to be investing in modern aircraft carriers, stealth fighter jets, and advanced missiles. Chinese Premier Li Keqiang laid out the country's annual budget on Monday at the National People's Congress. He said China's economic growth target for this year is 6.5%. The Congress will also decide whether to eliminate presidential term limits, allowing Xi to stay in office. For United News International in Tokyo, I'm Jung-soo Kim.
The U.S. Navy made history Monday when it put an aircraft carrier with F-35B jets out to sea. By deploying the aircrafts in the Pacific, the country is sending a message to China and North Korea that it has more capable equipment. The U.S. Navy said in a press release, "The F-35B is the most capable aircraft ever to support a Marine rifleman on the ground." A retired former F-35B squadron commander said, "You're about to put for the first time ever 5th-generation fighters on a ship at sea and put it into a highly contested area that is fraught with geopolitical risk and controversy and tensions."
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and U.S. President Donald Trump smiled broadly in their White House meeting, despite both being embroiled in scandal. Netanyahu wasted no time turning the attention to the U.S. president for his decision to recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital.
Mr. President, this will be remembered by our people throughout the ages.
Netanyahu is in Washington in advance of his address on Tuesday before the largest Israeli lobby group in the U.S., AIPAC. But Netanyahu made it clear he was also seeking U.S. support for what he sees as Israel's greatest security challenge.
It's encapsulated in one word: Iran. Iran has not given up its nuclear ambitions. It came out of this nuclear deal emboldened, enriched.
Both Netanyahu and Trump have made no secret of their loathing of the 2015 agreement, agreed on by the U.S. and the other world powers with Iran to limit Tehran's nuclear program. Both believe the agreement's duration is too short and is weakened by the fact it does not address Iran's ballistic missile program. There's also shared concern over what they believe is Iran's rising influence and a desire for a permanent presence in Syria.
Israelis want more American support against Iran. Trump has talked big against Iran, but he has done very, very little.
The U.S. president has also talked about striking a peace deal between the Israelis and Palestinians. Trump's Jerusalem declaration in December infuriated Palestinian leaders. They're now calling on the international community to negotiate a deal, not the U.S., a point the president seems to have ignored.
The Palestinians, I think, are wanting to come back to the table very badly. If they don't, you don't have peace. You don't have peace. If they don't, you don't have peace, and that's a possibility also. I'm not saying it's going to happen.
Indeed, Donald Trump's Mideast peace efforts are almost non-existent. Still, he said on Monday he may now himself go to Israel to open the new U.S. embassy in Jerusalem. Kimberly Halkett, Al Jazeera, Washington.
Myanmar is pursuing its ethnic cleansing of Rohingya Muslims, a senior United Nations official says. Andrew Gilmore, the UN Assistant Secretary General for Human Rights, has just visited the Cox's Bazar district in neighbouring Bangladesh. On hearing the accounts of those who've recently arrived, he says they still face terror and forced starvation on the other side of the border.
What is going on at the moment? Not only are there still killings, are there still rapes on a large scale, not only are they driving people out with force and threats, but also there is it seems, almost systematic attempt to destroy their future livelihoods.
Buddhist-majority Myanmar says its security crackdown has been targeting violent Rohingya militants.
I do not buy for one moment the narrative that some of those who were responsible for the ethnic cleansing have been putting out, that these are a radical population. But it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. If they are driven into conditions that are so bad and are deprived of all hope, then surely they will become radicalized.
Myanmar denies ethnic cleansing, saying it will take refugees back, but villages are flattened and grave risks remain.
According to a report by Gizmodo, Google has now partnered with the United States Department of Defense to assist the agency in developing artificial intelligences for analyzing drone footage. While the pilot project with the Defense Department's Project Maven has not been previously reported, anonymous sources within the company claim that it was widely discussed after information on the project was shared on an internal mailing list. Sources reportedly said that some Google employees were outraged that the company would offer resources to the military for surveillance technology involved in drone operations, while others reportedly argued that the project raised serious ethical questions about the development and use of machine learning.
Counter-terrorism officers in Greece launched an operation in the early hours of Tuesday to arrest suspected members of a far-right extremist group calling itself Combat 18 Hellas. House raids in various parts of Attica and in one more location that's not been disclosed have so far led to 6 people being called in for questioning in relation to several bomb and arson attacks. According to high-ranking members of the Hellenic police, the group has carried out at least 15 attacks on anarchist or far-left hangouts, as well as vandalising a memorial 3 years ago to Pavlos Faisas, the musician who was stabbed to death by a member of the neo-Nazi party Golden Dawn in September 2013.
South Africa's health ministry has warned consumers about processed meat products after finding a link to a listeria outbreak. On Monday, March 5th, multiple South African countries, including Mozambique and Botswana, recalled or suspended imports of meat products. Since the beginning of last year, 948 people in South Africa have fallen ill from the bacterial disease. 180 people have died. According to a statement from South Africa's Minister of Health, officials have identified a popular meat product known as polony as the source of the outbreak. The tainted sausage is believed to have come from a food production facility for Enterprise Foods in Polokwane. The CEO of Tiger Brands, which owns Enterprise Foods, said on Monday there is, quote, no direct link between its products and death from listeria. The World Health Organization says South Africa's listeria outbreak is the largest recorded outbreak. For United News International, I'm Rachel Latham.
At least 10 people have been arrested in Brazil over a rotten meat scandal in one of the country's largest companies. Police are looking into claims that senior executives at food firm BRF paid bribes to conceal unhygienic conditions at meatpacking plants. Search and seizure operations have been carried out across the country amid fears of a health risk. The man in charge of the investigations says they've detected the presence of salmonella and also found cases where results had been changed.
E caso até durante a investigação de própria troca de resultado.
The inquiry, dubbed weak flesh, has wreaked havoc on the sector and temporarily shut export markets to Brazil, the world's largest beef and chicken exporter. Last year, BRF reported a loss of some €360 million, its worst results ever.
The U.S. Army wants to give soldiers an extra hand on the battlefield, literally. Late last month, the service announced that Army Research Lab engineers are officially testing what they've dubbed third arm technology. While this mechanical third arm looks like something out of a science fiction movie, it was designed with fatigue in mind. According to engineers, the third arm helps soldiers wield oversized weapons and carry heavy loads downrange by displacing the weight from the arms to the torso. The project, which was unveiled last year at a conference, was first tested by 6 soldiers during a pilot study last summer. While the third arm did help reduce muscle fatigue, some testers had issues with its clunkiness. So engineers said that they have made a new prototype, which they plan to test again this spring. For United News International in Washington, D.C., I'm Caitlin Mangham.
Calling for justice while carrying the remains of the dead. Hundreds joined the funeral procession of some of the men killed in an attack on Monday at a military checkpoint in the southern district of Shopian. The Indian Army says at least 2 of the dead belong to the armed group Lashkar-e-Taiba, and others killed in the crossfire were civilians. Whatever the case, few here believe the military's explanation for the deaths.
Look, these innocent young boys were just regular people. They were dragged out of their cars and brutally killed, at least 6 of them. How long will this last? For how long we are going to die? We want to ask the government, are they going to kill us every day?
Earlier on Monday, one of Indian-administered Kashmir's most influential separatist leaders, Yasin Malik, led a march against the killings. He and his supporters ignored restrictions on protests and took to the streets of the main city Srinagar, where they accused political leaders of not doing enough to prevent deaths.
The killing of 3 civilians in Shopian was only meant to terrorize the people of Kashmir because it's a murder of innocents. I hold the political parties that contest the elections here responsible for this bloodbath.
Malik was soon arrested and taken into police custody. Security was beefed up in Srinagar and restrictions imposed in several areas. Markets remained shut and vehicles largely stayed off the roads, with some Kashmiris choosing to stay indoors. But elsewhere, protests turned violent. Hundreds defied a curfew and confronted security forces. Tear gas was fired to disperse the crowds. Indian government leaders accused Pakistan of training and arming separatist groups who attack the Indian Army. Pakistan denies the allegations. Since independence in 1947, the nuclear-armed neighbors have fought 2 of their 3 wars over Muslim-majority Kashmir, which both say is their territory. Imtiaz Taib, Al Jazeera.
Jani Alam is doing what he can to try and strengthen his home against the monsoon rains that will soon fall on this Rohingya refugee camp in Cox's Bazar. But really, there's not much he can do to stop his tent being swept into the canal a few meters below.
We're at the bottom of a hill, so this place could be easily washed away. There's also a risk of mudslide. I might be able to rebuild the hut, but I'm more afraid of my family being killed by storms and floodwater.
Rohingya started running from Myanmar last August, and around 700,000 ended up in these camps in Bangladesh. Conditions are squalid, and the people living in these homes, built on steep terraces, will have little chance against torrential rain that will turn everything to mud.
Ideally, we would like to evacuate many people from the site, but that depends on available land, which we don't have so far. We are extremely concerned, and the steps we're taking are only mitigating steps. We're not claiming it will help everybody, and we are worried about the future, very worried indeed.
The UN says around 100,000 refugees here could be in grave danger from landslides and floods. And the Rohingya come from a part of Myanmar where they have no experience of how to manage extreme weather.
What scares us the most is if it rains during the night when we are sleeping. There might be landslides. We could die in our sleep.
There's some engineering work going on. A canal is being cleared to make way for the rainwater. Retaining walls are being built, pathways reinforced. But it's going to be hard work to withstand the destructive force of monsoon downpours which are on the way. Bernard Smith, Al Jazeera.
The daytime sleep patterns of these fruit bats have been altered, sending thousands into the afternoon sky. But the commotion is for a good cause. They're being woken so some can be caught temporarily in the name of health and science. Samples are taken from the bats to try to discover more about the many viruses they carry and how and when they can be passed on to domestic or farm animals and ultimately to humans.
We know that some of the viruses have the season of transmission. So that means we know which period of the year is the highest risk.
The research is part of a global initiative to try to build a protocol and model of how to prevent or contain a major outbreak. Recent examples in other parts of the world of viruses being transmitted from animals to humans include Ebola, MERS and SARS. One of the main focuses of this research is Nipah virus, which is common in this variety of fruit bat. The virus was first discovered across the border in Malaysia 20 years ago when an outbreak killed more than 100 people. In that case, the virus was transmitted from bats to pigs to humans, something that could happen here in Thailand's Chonburi province. Surrounding the bat colony are several pig farms. Researchers conduct tests on the animals and educate farmers about what to look out for if, for example, an animal eats something that was dropped by a bat infected with a virus.
I've changed to better farming practices, and I've learned more about diseases and how to detect them. Before, my pigs got diarrhea and anthrax. I didn't know how to treat them, but now I know.
As well as researching the behavior of known viruses, the Thai scientists have also found at least 2 new ones. That information will now go into a database for scientists around the world to access. They believe their research and discoveries will see them better equipped to manage the next outbreak of a virus originating from the humble fruit bat. Wayne Hay, Al Jazeera, Chonburi, Thailand.